Shabbat Shalom, brothers and sisters. I'm Moreh Rapha'Yah. We're just about to start the Torah portion of this Shabbat. My advice, like always, please take notes and write it down, because the more you write it down and take notes, the more you get to remember. And the Torah is like that. It gets impregnated into our brain, into our mind, in our souls. And that's how we grow more and more into the Torah. In this Shabbat, we will study the Torah portion called Beshalah. Beshalah is one of the Torah portions that perhaps are being modified as one of the most important Torahs in the entire time. So as we can see, the Beshalah is the Torah portion for this Shabbat. So let's start off. Let's jump into it. It's number 16 of the Torah portions. It's on Shemot, or Exodus 13, verse 17 to 17, verse 16. Beshalah, which means he had sent. Ayil Almighty did not let them into the path that goes through the land of the Philistines, because it was closed. Ayil thought that the people, seeing the war, could change their way of thinking and return to Egypt. Here, brothers and sisters, seeing something very staggering, because the Creator already knew the people's heart. They weren't strong. They were really weak. And not only that, we will see next the reason why they will get discouraged by something very scary for the people who are not exposed to this kind of situations. Rather, the Creator found another way to bring them to the land of Israel, but then again, our fathers kept messing up. So let's continue with this, and let me show you with a map, so you guys can have an idea of how this went down. This is the way of Horus here, where from Goshen, our Creator brought our forefathers out of Egypt and going all the way up to Israel. But they couldn't make it within a day to Eretz Israel, to the land of Israel. But then again, the Creator thought it was much better to bring them down here into the southern part of the Egypt Peninsula. Now here, I want you to see something next. In the book of YHWH 75 verse 1, at that time in the year 180 of the Israelites who went down to Egypt, mighty men came down of Egypt, 30,000, on foot, for the sons of Israel who were on the tribe of Joseph from the sons of Ephraim. They were so desperate to get out of there, and they knew the prophecy that was needed to be fulfilled, to the point where they thought the 400 years was already over, but it wasn't. It was literally 180 years. But if you really do math, in which I will bring in next, it was they thought it was the year 400 already of being there completely, from the time of our father Yahweh made the covenant with our father Abraham, was already over 400 years. But in reality, it was minus 30 years that they were short. And I want to show you in very, very momentarily. Let's switch here. Verse 2, for they said that the period which Yahweh had appointed the sons of Israel in the times of old, who had spoken to Abraham, had been completed. That's what they thought, but it wasn't. These men bound themselves and put each man his sword by his side, and each man his armor upon him, and trusted on their strength, and went out of Egypt together with one mighty hand. See, this is what happens when we rush into things. This is what happens when we put the trust in us, in ourselves, in man. And we always keep messing up. Instead of putting the trust in Yahweh Sebaot, Once we put the trust in Yahweh Sabaoth, everything's going to be fine because we know that He has the right time. The problem nowadays is that we want things right away. We want things overnight. We want things like a microwave in seconds. But it doesn't work that way, brothers and sisters. It doesn't work that way at all. It has to be in Yahweh's time, not in our time. That's why in the Abinu Chashamayim, Father which are in heaven, remember how Mashiach said that? He said that for a reason. He said, Our Father which are in heaven, let there be your will. You see that? It's not my will, but His will. The problem is we always want to make it our will. And that's where we always get in trouble. So let's continue. I want you to see this, and let's recap from the previous Torah portions. Chapter 12, verse 40. The time that the sons of Israel lived in Canaan and the land of Mizraim, or Egypt, was 430. Here it is complete their 430 years in two places, in the land of Canaan and the land of Egypt. Now, how does it work? Let's go into the Targum Jonathan 12:40 of Exodus. In the days of sojourn of the sons of Israel in Mizraim, or Egypt, were 30 weeks of years. 30 times 7, which is the sum of 210 years. But the number of 430 years had passed. Yahweh spoke to Abraham in the hour that He spoke to him in the 15th of Abib, between the divided parts, unto the day they left Mizraim, which means, brothers and sisters, that the 400 year started when our Father Yahweh made the covenant with our father Abraham on the 15th of Abib. If you want to read it, it will be on Genesis or Bereshit chapter 15. He made the covenant there. And there, that's where the 400 years starts until it ends with Moses or Moshe. But now, where's the other 30 years that are short? I will show you very next. Exodus 12:42. This was the night when Yahweh kept a vigil to bring them out of the land of Egypt. And this very night continues to be when Yahweh keeps vigil all the children of Israel throughout their generations. This is the night. That's why Pesach, Passover, is very, very important. We cannot miss this because it is a great importance for every Israelite, every Hebrew. Numbers 33, verse 3, they began their journey of Ramesses in the Bachodesh Chayirishon, which is the first month. On the first day of the first month, the morning after Pesach, the sons of Israel went out, hand raised, in the sight of all the Egyptians. Do you see that? All this happened in the first 15 of Abib. 15 verse 3, what I was just telling you earlier, Yahweh said to Abram, know this, by the way, that your Sarah will be strangers in the land as not theirs. They will take you into slavery, and you will be treated wickedly and humiliated there for 400 years. Where does it start, the 400 years? Exactly where we're reading at, when Yahweh is making that covenant with our father Abraham. With the 30 years is previous to that. So let's continue, and I will show you next. But real quick, verse 16, only in the fourth generation your Sarah will return here, because the evil of the Amorites have not yet completed. See, all this was already foretold by Yahweh to our forefathers, that all this was going to happen. Who were the Amorites? That's a good question. They were the giants. They were the Nephilims that were made after the flood. Here it was too early. By the time that Moses is bringing our forefathers out of Egypt, it was already infested of Nephilims, giants. That's what it says until, because the Amorites, evil the Amorites is not completed, which happens to be, at that time. Now, Let's go into the Targum Jonathan of 1241 of Exodus, and it was at the end of the 30 years from the fact that of this pact or covenant that Yitzhak was born. And from there until they left Mitzrayim was 400 years. The same day was when all the forces of Yahweh were released from the land of Egypt. You see this? So when did the 30 years start? Started prior to where Yahweh made the covenant with our father. Now, let me show you real quick, when was this? If you notice here, when Abraham was called from Yahweh, he was 70 years old. 5 years later is when Yahweh said to Abraham, our father Abraham, go out of Haran. He was already 75. 25 years later, Yitzhak is born. He was, Abraham was 100 years. This is what the Torah speaks about. 30 years is already there. Then, that's why he made the covenant. Now, 60 years later, this is where Yaakov is born. If you're making the count from 5 to 25 to 60, and plus 130 is where Yaakov enters Egypt. The total of all this is 220 years. This is the period where they were in Canaan. Okay, remember what the Torah says, that they were Canaan and Egypt, the 430 years. Now let's continue. 280 years, that's where YHWH died. After Yaakov entered, okay? And when Moses went out with our fathers, that was in Pesach, 15 of Aviv, it was a complete 430 years. Now, 210 years is where they stay in Egypt. Let's continue. From the moment, let's recap real quick. From the time that our father Abraham was called, he was 70 years, and from that moment all the way until our Moshe take our forefathers out of Egypt, then he was a complete 430 years. Now let's jump into the fourth generation. The first generation starts after when Abraham said, Yahweh said to Abraham, in your seed, in your descendants. Whose descendants is that? Yitzhak. When Yitzhak was born, that was the first generation. The second generation was Yaakov when he enters Egypt. The third generation is YHWH. When he dies, it was already 280 years. Moses is when he gets our people out. That was the fourth generation. Now, from the moment that Yitzhak is born all the way to they went out, the Exodus is 400 years. You see that? The difference between another? Exodus 14 verse 5, when the king of Mitzrayim was told that the people have fled, Pharaoh and his servants changed their mind in their hearts towards the people. They said, what have we done, letting Israel's sons cease to be our slaves? That's a question they asked themselves. And this happened after 3 years. 3 days that this happened. Our forefathers went out with a strong hand out of Egypt because Yahweh made that happen. And I want you to see something very, very staggering and very, very surprising that not a lot of people talk about, but we will talk about this time. And it's very surprising because it's encoded in the Torah, what the Torah has been speaking for so many years. We're going to decodify this. Let's go into the book of Exodus 8:25. Pharaoh sent for Moshe and Aaron and said, go and do your immolations, your sacrifice for your Almighty here on earth. Why am I bringing all this? Is because remember what he said, let us go for a 3-day trip, 3-day journey to the desert. That was a reason why he said that, and why it has a lot to do with the 15 of Abib. Let's go back and make and I'm going to show you soon. The Targum Yonatan on 14:5, the officers who went with Israel announced that the people have fled, and the hearts of Pharaoh and his servants became evil against the people and said, what have we done? Because we have freed the Israel from serving us. Look at what it says here in Yasher 81 verse 12. And all the Egyptians saw and beheld Moshe and Aaron and all the sons of Israel who were seated before Picharirot, eating and drinking and celebrating the feast of Yahweh. And all the Egyptians said to the sons of Israel, surely you said you will go into a journey of 3 days into the wilderness, sacrifice to our Almighty, and return. They never said they were going to return. They said they were going to sacrifice a feast to Yahweh into the wilderness, 3-day trip. Okay, 3-day trip. Now let's recap in all this, because our forefathers went out of Egypt in the 15th of Abib. The question is when the 15th of Abib fell in the week, and we can actually trace it down. In the Torah calendar, we can actually trace it down. Now let's go over here, brothers and sisters. This is basically when our forefathers went out of Egypt, and this happened on the month of Abib. The month of Abib, on the 15th of Abib, fell on a Wednesday. And the Wednesday, when they went out, it was 3-day trip. So the first day of the trip was the 15th of Abib, the 16th of Abib, the 17th of Abib. That's 3-day trip. When is the next day of rest? Shabbat, brothers and sisters. You see this? Shabbat, 3-day trip, and the next one they rested. It was this day of Shabbat. Now let's go back over here and look what it says. And all the Egyptians saw and beheld Moshe and Aaron and all the sons of Israel who were seated before Picharirot, eating and drinking. Do you see that? And they were celebrating. What day was it? It was a Shabbat, brothers and sisters. But the amazing thing, what I'm going to bring right now, next, is that after that, something happened. Okay? Verse 14. Now, therefore, this 5th day ago, since you left, why don't you go back with your masters? Moshe and Aaron answered them and saying, for Yahweh our Yil Almighty have testified in us, saying, you should not return no more to Egypt, but we will take us to the land of flowing with milk and honey, as Yahweh our Almighty has sworn to our forefathers to give us. You see this? This happened on the 5th day. Now, let's recap again and let's go back to the calendar. Okay, so our forefathers once again took off on a Wednesday, on the middle of the week, the 15th of Abib, 3-day trip, 15, 16, and 17, 3 days of trip. The following day, of course, it was a Shabbat, brothers and sisters. It was a festival. Now, let me pause here for a second, and let me tell you this. In the Torah, in the book of Devarim, or Deuteronomy, or Leviticus 23, the other one is 16, by the way, it says very clear that the Shabbat, or the festivals rather, all the festivals, it starts with Shabbat. It says very clear. So here's a clear indication that they were celebrating a Shabbat. That Shabbat, we just saw it. Now, we just saw earlier on that previous verse where they said that, oh, now is the fifth day that you took off. Okay, let's go back to and if you notice here is the 18th of Abib, which fell on a Shabbat. But remember, the 5th day, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 15th, what they call it today, is Yom Rishon, which is a Sunday. They came on a Sunday, say, hey, it's already the 5th day. Why don't you come back with us? And they said, no more. So here's a clear indication that our forefathers were keeping Torah all the way through. Now let's go back into the map. This is what the path that our Father Yahweh led them into, to go into the next land, to the Rapha'Yah, what they call it today. and which is the Mountain Sinai, which is about our laws. 81 verse 40, when the sons of Israel have entered in the sea and the Egyptians came after them, the waters of the sea resumed upon them, and they sunk in the water, and not a single man was left except of the lighthouse, who gave thanks to Yahweh and believed in him. Therefore, Yahweh did not assist them to perish at the time of the Egyptians. If you notice here, brothers and sisters, this is something very, very important for us. It is important because here we truly believe that Yahweh wanted to basically save the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh wanted to have him saved so he can experience and see everything that Yahweh was basically doing. It was basically that. It says it was left except who? Pharaoh. Pharaoh was the only one left. All the male Egyptians were gone. And not only that, if you read the book of Jasher, it says that he spared him, he believed in Yahweh, and he did not return to Egypt. Rather, he went to Assyria and became a king. We believe also with other scriptures that this same Pharaoh became a king in Assyria. And remember, Assyria, the main capital, happens to be Nineveh. Remember who went to Nineveh? It was Jonah. Remember what Jonah did when Yahweh said, go to Nineveh because they have sinned and I'm going to destroy them in 40 days. It was the same Pharaoh that was ruling once in the other side. He encountered him again. All this is very, very surprising to know in these latter days. Who were these people? Why did the Yahweh mess with their minds? It's just to show them their power of Yahweh. That's basically it. Exodus 14:24. Just before the dawn, Yahweh looked through the pillar of fire at the Egyptians and drove them into panic. How did this happen, brothers and sisters? It's because Yahweh's power wanted to lure them in. They thought they were trapped, but rather they were trapped because Yahweh is a mighty warrior. Remember what Moshe said to our forefathers? Stand still, don't move a muscle. Yahweh is going to take care of this. And exactly happened. The pillar of fire and cloud was with our fathers. It was a fire to our forefathers, and also smoke to the Egyptians, but also the fire went against the Egyptians. And look at what it says. The Targum Yonatan on 14:20 of Exodus, and it was in the morning watch at the moment when the powers from the on high came to offer exaltation. Yahweh looked in an anger into the host of Mizraim, or the Egyptians, from the pillar of fire to hurl upon them flakes of fire and hail, from the pillar of clouds, and to confound the forces of the Egyptians. See how powerful our Father Yahweh is? Yahweh Sebaot is a mighty warrior. He knows how to defend us. He did it with our forefathers in the wilderness. He did it with Pharaoh. He lured them into the ocean. And not only that, he confounded them in a tremor and hail and fire and everything. I mean, no wonder why they didn't know what to do. Plus, the water came about. That was it. They were toasted, completely toasted. No one was left out because the power of Yahweh, once again, he is our creator. He knows how to fight. 14:15 of Exodus, Shemot, Yahweh asked Moshe, why are you crying out to me? Tell the sons of Israel to march forward. Lift up the rod, stretch it out with thy hand over the seed, and divide it into two. The sons of Israel will advance into the seed on dry land. exactly what Moshe did. He did exactly what Yahweh told him to do it, and yet our forefathers saw the wonders of Yahweh Sebaot when this happened. Book of Yashar 81 verse 16, and when the nobles of Egypt saw the sons of Israel would not listen to them in order to return, they bound themselves to fight with Israel. This is what happens when our forefathers not only had the ability to confront our forefathers into the wilderness, but look at what happened after this, brothers and sisters. Exodus 15 verse 6, your right hand, Yahweh, is exalted with might. Your right hand of Yahweh destroy the enemy. You see how powerful it is, Yahweh, his right hand. Now my question to you guys, every one of you, who is his right hand? And is Yahushua, is the Mashiach. The Mashiach is the one who was fighting with our forefathers in the wilderness. He did it in the Yam Suf, in the cedar reeds. Now look at what it says, Exodus 15 verse 8. With a breath from your nostrils, the waters piled up, standing tall like a wall. The returning waters stopped. The deep waters froze into the heart of the ocean. It's exactly the mighty power of Yahweh. We see movies, but we can never imagine the very, event that took place in the Yam Suf, which is the cedar reeds. All this happened, and there's so much evidence that we can show up about this, but nevertheless, we can only imagine how our forefathers experienced the power of Yahweh. Now, I want to show you this, the Torah scroll, but if you notice chapter 15, where our forefathers went into the ocean in the middle of the wall, each other, on the right side, left side, here in the same Torah, we see the same thing, brothers and sisters. If you notice here, there's a wall here, there's another wall here. Our forefathers are passing through here. That's the way they wrote in the Torah. See how amazing it is, brothers and sisters? Even in the Torah shows the power of Yahweh Sebaot. Once again, the Egyptians experienced the mighty power of Yahweh, and that was the only thing they saw. That was the last thing they saw when they died in the waters, when they died seeing the power of Yahweh. Now, look at what it says here. I'm going to show you real quick. This is the King James 1526. They came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water, 70 palm trees, and they camped there by the waters. Now, let me pause here for a moment, brothers and sisters. The reason why I bring in this verse is because we always hear the word Elim, Elim, right? The sweet waters, Elim, Elim. But in reality, they've been lying us for a long time. And I will show you the proof. All the time, either Christians, Messianics, and even our Jewish brothers, they've been trying to hide the truth right in front of our eyes. Even the so-called scholars of the Bible, they've been telling us that's what it is. But when we actually look into it, that is not the case. Let me show you what exactly the word Elim is. And it's never been Elim. Is the word Ayilima. Ayilimah. They came to Ayilima where there were 12 springs. Now, how in the world did that happen? I will show you that. This is the word in Hebrew, Ayilima, which is the Aleph, Yod, Lamed, Mem. Ayilim. You see this? Ayilim, which means the strong trees. And I will show you the truth. Ayilimah, which means Aleph, Yod, Lamed, is not L, brothers and sisters, okay? They making it as a L, and I'll show you proof next, which is Ayilima, which is Mem, and what else? Hey, see, Ayilimach. Now, Ayil, of course, Aleph, Yod, Lamed, which means ram, pole, strength, chief, oak, ram. You see the variations, brothers and sisters? So, which means that our Father, Yahweh, is not Elohim. He's not a deity. He's not a demon. Rather, he's a strong chief. See that? El, in the other hand, this is what they try to confuse us with words, but in reality, the entire time, this word that you're looking at, it refers to demons, to deities, to basically any idol worshiping, okay, and dark forces. Nothing else. This title doesn't apply to our Creator Yahweh Sebaot. It never has. Look at what the Interpreter's Dictionary says, Volume 1, page 817. We find the information that El Elohim simply means demon. In the Hebrew Scriptures, Daimonism or Daemon, Volume 7, page 674, the Judea Encyclopedia tell us that most of these terms were also used by the Canaanites to designate their Elohim pagan gods. This is not surprising since they were settled in the Promised Land. The first Israelites made the language of Canaan their own. Do you see that? So basically, Isaiah in 19:18, we see a great verse there. The Hebrew language would naturally use Canaanite vocabulary for terms designating their own deity. And this is exactly what's happening right now. They try to throw us in our throats, in our faces, that this is a Hebrew language, but in reality it's a Canaanite. It was never a Hebrew language. They incorporated later when they went inside the Canaanite region until our own timing right now. So let me show you proof that I'm not lying to you, okay? Look what it's 15:15 of Exodus. Then the princes of Edom were turbulent, and the Aili, the mighty of Moab, were overwhelmed by the trembling. Now, why do we say it says Aili? I will prove it to you right now. Look at it, Exodus 15:15. If you notice here, brothers and sisters, it says Ele here, right? But if you notice below, it says Aleph, Yod, Lamed, Yod, Ayili. See that? But they trying to give their own explanation. In reality, is not. When if you know a little bit Hebrew, you know that that's not what it says. Another verse. There are so many. I just give you a couple. 14:6, verse 6 of Exodus. And the Herites in the mountains of Seir unto Ayil Param. I know it says El Param, but it's Ayil Param who is left in the desert. Now let me show you the proof. 14 verse 6. You see where it says El, but in reality it's Aleph, Yod, Lame, Ayil. So once again, we're not lying. We're not bringing anything out of the hat. We rather bring you the truth because that's the way it should be. Brothers and sisters, hope that this small Torah portion brings knowledge to all of you to understand how powerful Yahweh is with the nations, and it shows how powerful it is and how mighty it is in our hearts, our minds. When we come to know the knowledge of our Creator, the mind of Mashiach, then we realize how amazing our Father is since all times. So let's continue this Shabbat. I ask you to always pray for us, and hopefully our productions will come more and more that we are making so. And hopefully our Creator give us the time that we can make more in the future. I'm Moreh Rapha'Yah. We'll see you next time. Shalom, shalom.